The universe, in its infinite wisdom and finite patience, had organized itself into a hierarchy that would have made any self-respecting evolutionary biologist weep into their taxonomy charts. At the top of this pyramid sat the species, who could reliably turn other species into component atoms, followed by those who could merely maim effectively, and at the bottom huddled everyone else, who had evolved on planets where the most dangerous predator was occasionally weather or perhaps a moderately aggressive plant. The Interstellar Threat Assessment Bureau had been established approximately 400 standard years ago, after the Third Contact War had demonstrated that assuming everyone wanted to be friends was an excellent way to lose several colonies and a considerable amount of credibility. The Bureau operated from a station called Kepler 9, which hung in neutral space like a particularly judgmental moon, and its singular purpose was to determine who could kill whom, file the appropriate paperwork, and ideally prevent the massacres before they required cleanup crews. The system worked on a straightforward principle. Species were ranked by lethality. Apex predators, those blessed or cursed with natural weapons that could end fights before they started, occupied the top tier. They received the best trade routes, the prime diplomatic postings, and invitations to parties that actually served decent refreshments rather than nutrient paste. These were your crawling warriors, with their crystalline exoskeletons that could shatter starship hulls, your Veltron hunters with their six-limbed efficiency and thermal vision that could track prey through walls, your Silex assassins who had evolved stealth to the point where they could stand in an empty room and you still would not see them. Below them clustered the mid-tier predators, dangerous enough to warrant respect but not quite terrifying enough to clear a room. They received adequate planets, reasonable trade agreements, and invitations to most conferences, though rarely the interesting ones. At the bottom of this food chain sat the prey species, civilizations that had evolved on worlds so peaceful that their idea of conflict resolution involved committee meetings and strongly worded memorandums. They received the paperwork jobs, the administrative positions, and a general understanding that the galaxy's more exciting opportunities were not meant for them. And then humanity had shown up and complicated everything. Humans had arrived 73 years ago from a planet that preliminary surveys had classified as a Class 7 death world, which was the polite scientific way of saying that everything on Earth either wanted to kill you, could kill you accidentally, or was biding its time. The survey teams had expected the dominant sapient species to be armored nightmares with redundant vital organs and a casual relationship with mortality. Instead, they found bipedal mammals with no natural weapons, skin that could be punctured by thorns, and bones that broke if they fell wrong. Humans had conquered their murderous planet, not through superior armament, but through sheer stubborn persistence, and what could only be described as weaponized pattern recognition. They hunted by following prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They solved problems by trying every possible solution and several impossible ones. They had domesticated wolves into dogs and somehow convinced cats, obligate carnivores perfectly capable of surviving without them, to live in their homes and occasionally knock things off tables for entertainment. The Threat Assessment Bureau had spent 7 decades attempting to categorize humans. Every indicator sent mixed signals. Humans had forward-facing eyes like predators but formed social bonds like prey animals. They came from a death world but seemed genuinely distressed when other species were injured. They had developed weapons capable of planetary extinction but used them primarily to threaten each other. They would adopt anything that sat still long enough, including species that outweighed them by several hundred kilograms and had documented records of eating primates. Eventually, the Bureau had filed humans under omnivore generalist with unclear predator tendencies, which was the bureaucratic equivalent of giving up and hoping the problem resolved itself. Humans were assigned to diplomatic corps, scientific research positions, and engineering roles. They seemed content with this arrangement. They smiled frequently, which several species found unsettling, because those were definitely teeth designed for tearing meat, and they got along with almost everyone. This arrangement had worked adequately for 7 decades. And then Commander Vrix received an assignment that would test this arrangement considerably. Commander Vrix of the Kralline Empire was having what humans would call a bad week, though his species measured time in crystalline resonance cycles, and the concept did not translate well. His people, the Kralline, had recently suffered a catastrophic blow to their collective pride. They had been downgraded from apex predator to high-tier predator, following an incident with the Thorvik Confederation that had involved significant property damage and a rather public demonstration that Kralline exoskeletons, while impressive, could be shattered by species with superior kinetic weaponry. The downgrade had been humiliating. Kralline society was built on a foundation of martial prowess and the understanding that they were, objectively, terrifying. To be knocked down a tier was to suggest they were merely dangerous rather than existentially threatening. Vrix's clutchmates had not spoken to him since the announcement, which was traditional Kralline for expressing deep shame. Which explained why, when Intelligence Division transmitted a priority assignment regarding human military capabilities, Vrix had accepted before reading the full briefing. The file made interesting reading once he actually examined it. Human military installations, intelligence reported, were surprisingly opaque to standard surveillance. Not because humans employed sophisticated counterintelligence, the briefing was careful to note, but because human security protocols made no coherent sense. They changed access codes based on something called weekdays, which corresponded to no astronomical phenomenon. They classified information using systems that appeared random. They secured their facilities with locks that could be defeated by bent wire, but protected their communication networks with encryption that would take quantum computers centuries to crack. Intelligence had concluded, with the kind of logic that made perfect sense at 3 in the morning after too much stimulant, that this apparent carelessness was obviously sophisticated misdirection. Humans came from a death world. Death worlds did not produce careless species. Therefore, humans were hiding their true capabilities. Therefore, human military installations were likely significantly more dangerous than currently assessed. Vrix was not entirely convinced by this reasoning, but he was extremely convinced by the opportunity it presented. If he could prove humans were secretly apex predators, it would reflect well on everyone who had been treating them as harmless. If he could prove they were actually as harmless as they appeared, that was almost as valuable. Either way, successful intelligence gathering would restore his standing. He assembled his team within 6 hours. Qhoss was Veltron, which meant he resembled what would happen if someone crossed a large feline with too many limbs and a targeting computer. 6-limbed, covered in dense fur that concealed muscle capable of tearing through hull plating, equipped with thermal vision that could track heat signatures through solid walls, and possessed of a hunting record that included 17 confirmed kills of targets that should have killed him first. He was also, despite these impressive credentials, surprisingly professional. Vrix appreciated specialists who took their work seriously. Gentera represented the Silix Covenant, a species that had evolved stealth to the point where their language had 17 words for different types of silence. She was roughly humanoid in shape, which was where the similarities to anything familiar ended. Her skin could match any background, with such precision that standing still rendered her functionally invisible. She produced no body heat. She could remain motionless for days while her metabolism slowed to near-death levels. Her people had a saying, "If a Silix wants you dead, you are already a corpse and simply have not noticed yet." Unit 7 was not technically alive, being an artificial intelligence housed in a combat drone chassis, but it had been granted provisional citizenship by the Mechax Collective and possessed very strong opinions about organic bias against synthetic intelligence. Its chassis was roughly spherical, studded with sensors and weapon systems, and capable of hovering silently while its anti-gravity generators did physics things that Vrix did not fully understand and did not need to. Unit 7 was armed sufficiently to level small buildings and equipped with chemical analyzers capable of identifying compounds at the molecular level. Together, they represented 3 apex predator species and 1 extremely advanced AI. If humans were hiding military secrets, this team would uncover them. Their target was Meridian Outpost, a human facility orbiting an unremarkable moon in a system that served primarily as a navigation waypoint. According to intelligence, the facility officially operated as a training center for civilian engineering personnel. Unofficially, intelligence suspected it housed human military specialists engaged in classified weapons research. The outpost maintained a staff of approximately 200 humans and possessed security protocols that intelligence had described as insultingly inadequate. Infiltration took 4 hours and proved exactly as insulting as advertised. They bypassed the main docking ports entirely, located a maintenance airlock that was not merely unlocked but actually propped open with what appeared to be a toolbox, and entered the station's service corridors without triggering a single alarm system. Either humans were genuinely this careless, which seemed unlikely for a species that had survived a death world, or they wanted intruders to enter, which suggested trap. Vrix kept his defensive fields active and his guard up. The corridors were clean, well-lit, and decorated with informational posters that provided safety reminders and motivational messages. One poster featured a cartoon human giving a thumbs-up gesture next to text reading, "Remember, proper lifting technique prevents injury." Another showed various alien species, together under the heading, "Diversity makes us stronger." A third, which Vrix found vaguely insulting without being able to articulate why, depicted a human and a Kraline shaking hands beneath text, proclaiming different bodies, shared goals. They proceeded deeper into the facility, following intelligence maps to the training wing. Station time appeared to be during a rest cycle, which explained the empty corridors. Perfect conditions for observation. The training wing was less a wing and more a converted cargo bay that someone had optimistically divided into workshops, equipment storage, and what appeared to be a small cafeteria. The team spread out, scanning for targets of interest. That was when Qhoss's thermal vision detected a heat signature in storage room 7B. Single individual, human-sized, elevated core temperature, which could indicate recent physical exertion or metabolic activity. Qhoss signaled the others, and they converged on the location with practiced efficiency. Gentara took point, her chameleonic skin blending seamlessly with corridor walls. Unit 7 positioned itself near the ceiling, sensors active. Vrix moved to where he could observe through the room's transparent observation panel. Inside, sitting on an overturned equipment crate and surrounded by maintenance tools, was a human. He appeared, in every measurable way, to be completely ordinary, male, judging by human sexual dimorphism markers, though the differences were subtle. Average height for his species. Dark hair that needed cutting. Standard issue maintenance coveralls, gray and somewhat stained, with a name patch reading Webb, M, and rank insignia indicating Junior Technician 3rd Class. He was eating lunch. This fact would not normally warrant attention. Most species ate lunch. It was biological necessity. What made this particular lunch noteworthy was what the human was consuming. Something red. Something dripping. Something that made every predator instinct Vrix possessed suddenly very interested. The human held what appeared to be some form of bread, split lengthwise and filled with spherical objects that were dark reddish-brown and actively leaking red fluid onto his hands. He bit into this with obvious pleasure, chewed, swallowed, and took another bite while looking at something on his datapad. Unit 7's sensors activated. Scanning the food, the AI's analysis came through their secure communication channel, clinical and precise, blood signature confirmed. Detecting hemoglobin, iron compounds, protein structures consistent with mammalian tissue. Also detecting capsaicin at significant concentrations, various organic acids, and complex hydrocarbon chains, suggesting fermentation processes. Vrix felt his crystalline structure resonate with interest. Finally, evidence. Is he consuming fresh kill? Qhoss asked, his thermal vision tracking the human's rising core temperature. His internal temperature is increasing, consistent with metabolic spike after consuming high-protein meal. Gentara, invisible against the wall, provided her assessment. Observe behavior. No aggression displays. No territorial marking. Either he does not perceive threats or is sufficiently confident to ignore them. They watched as the human set down his food and retrieved a bottle from his bag. The bottle was black, labeled with text in human standard script and an image depicting flames. The human shook the bottle, opened it, and poured dark red liquid over his food. Unit 7 sensors immediately went into alarm mode. Chemical weapon detected, the AI reported. Compound contains extreme concentrations of capsaicin, measured at 2.1 million Scoville heat units. This concentration is classified as a chemical irritant by Galactic Safety Standards Council. This human is deliberately contaminating his nutrition with it. Vrix stared through the observation panel, trying to process this information. The human took another bite of his now contaminated food, chewed thoughtfully, and reached for a cylindrical container that dispensed carbonated beverage. He drank, made a satisfied sound, and returned his attention to his datapad while continuing to eat. Why, Qhoss asked with genuine confusion, would a predator poison its own kill before consumption? Perhaps preservation method, Gentara suggested. Some species use chemical compounds to prevent bacterial decay in stored meat. That fails to explain voluntary consumption of neurotoxin at these concentrations, Unit 7 countered. At capsaicin levels this high, consumption would cause significant pain response in most organic species, unless humans have evolved immunity to neurotoxins as dietary adaptation. Vrix considered this possibility. It aligned with the death world profile. Perhaps humans had evolved to consume toxic substances as competitive advantage, making their kills inedible to scavengers. Perhaps they poisoned their prey deliberately. Perhaps the entire species was simply insane. We require closer observation and sample acquisition, Vrix decided. Gentara, approach and assess. Do not initiate contact unless necessary. Gentara did not respond verbally, because she was already moving. She crossed the corridor in absolute silence, her chameleonic skin adjusting continuously to match door frames, walls, shadows, and the very air itself. She slipped through the partially open door and took position behind a shelving unit less than 3 meters from the human, who continued eating, completely oblivious to the invisible apex predator now sharing his lunchroom. Gentara observed with professional detachment. The human's breathing was steady and relaxed. His heart rate, audible to her enhanced hearing, was calm. Approximately 70 beats per minute, no stress indicators, no alertness markers. He was genuinely treating this as a routine meal break, not a vulnerable moment requiring vigilance. She focused on the food itself. The bread appeared to be standard carbohydrate substrate, probably grain-based. The spherical objects were clearly processed meat, though the preparation method was unclear. The red liquid coating, everything was thicker than blood, more viscous, with visible particles suspended throughout. The smell, even through her species' limited olfactory senses, was intense. Acidic, sharp, with undertones suggesting fermentation or decomposition. The human reached into his bag and retrieved additional containers. One held thin sliced vegetables, pale yellow and crispy. Another contained small round objects that were bright red and glossy. He ate several of these red objects directly, crunching them between his teeth with apparent satisfaction. Unit 7 sensors tracked every compound. Additional capsaicin sources detected. Subject is consuming multiple varieties of chemical irritants simultaneously. Combined Scoville rating exceeds 300,000 units. This behavior is unprecedented in known predator species feeding patterns. Perhaps, Qhoss suggested, this is dominance display, demonstrating he can consume toxins that would incapacitate rivals. To whom? Gentara asked reasonably. He believes he is alone. The human pulled out more items, a bag of something that rustled. He opened it, ate a handful, and returned to his datapad. The sound of crunching filled the small room. That was when Unit 7 made its mistake. The AI, in its pursuit of more detailed sensor readings, had been hovering progressively closer to the observation window. Its anti-gravity field, normally silent to organic hearing ranges, created minor air currents. One of those currents reached through the partially open door and caught a toolbox that had been balanced precariously on a shelf. The toolbox fell. It impacted the floor with a crash that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. Wrenches, screwdrivers, calibration tools, and various implements scattered across the floor with maximum acoustic chaos. The human jumped violently, nearly dropped his food, and turned toward the sound with wide eyes. His gaze swept the room in a pattern that suggested trained observation rather than panic, and stopped directly on Gentara's position. She had not moved. She had not made sound. Her camouflage was perfect, rendering her functionally invisible to every known detection method. There was no possible way he could see her. She was the shadow in the corner. She was the absence of presence. She was nothing. He was looking directly at her. The human blinked, set his food down carefully on the crate, stood up slowly, hands visible and empty, body language deliberately non-threatening. His eyes never left her position. When he spoke, his voice was calm, confused, but notably not frightened. Hi there, can I help you with something?" The translator rendered it in standard Galactic, maintaining the original tone. He was addressing her like she was a lost colleague, not an infiltrator. Vrix made an immediate command decision and transmitted to all units, reveal positions. All units. Do not display aggression. We are compromised. They materialized from concealment like, particularly theatrical spirits. Vrix stepped into the doorway, his crystalline body catching light and refracting it in displays that were usually intimidating. Qhoss emerged from the corridor, 6 limbs and significant mass making his presence known. Gentara deactivated her camouflage, skin fading from wall texture to her natural silver-blue coloration. Unit 7 descended from ceiling height, weapon systems visible but not armed. 4 representatives of apex predator species. 4 beings capable of killing everything in this room. The human looked at them, looked at his lunch on the crate, looked back at them, and said, in that same confused and slightly apologetic tone, "Oh, that's just my lunch." He gestured at the bread thing with its red coating, as if this simple statement explained everything. Vrix's translator struggled with context. Lunch, midday meal, routine nutritional intake. The human was categorizing his feeding behavior as ordinary, non-threatening, routine, while consuming blood and chemical weapons. The human seemed to notice they were not responding and tried again. "Sorry, did I miss some kind of memo? Is this a security drill or something? Because nobody told me, and I'm really not supposed to be involved in those. I just fix broken equipment." He gestured at his uniform, at the scattered tools, at his lunch, as if these facts were self-evident and explained his presence. Unit 7 recovered first, its synthetic voice carrying perfect confusion. "You are consuming biological material contaminated with chemical irritants classified as weapons grade by 14 different species safety protocols. Explain this behavior." The human blinked, looked at his lunch again. Understanding visibly dawned across his features, followed immediately by what appeared to be amusement. "Oh, you mean the hot sauce? Yeah, sorry about that. I should have warned you guys. This stuff is pretty intense. My fault for eating it in a common area." He was apologizing. For eating chemical weapons. In case the smell bothered them. "Hot sauce," Vrix repeated slowly, testing the translated term. "Explain this designation." The human's expression suggested he was attempting to explain basic concepts to particularly slow children. "It's, sauce. That's hot. Spicy, you know?" He made a gesture that probably meant something in human culture. "We put it on food to make it taste better. Adds flavor. Kick. Heat. It's good. You deliberately contaminate your nutrition with neurotoxins for aesthetic purposes." Qhoss with the careful tone of someone confirming they heard correctly. The human considered this phrasing, seemed to find it accurate enough, and nodded, "Yeah, basically. Makes food more interesting. Some people like mild flavors, some like it hot. I'm kind of in between, but leaning toward the spicy side. This stuff is only about 200,000 Scoville. Not that extreme really. Only 200,000, Unit 7 repeated. That concentration would cause 4th-degree chemical burns to mucous membranes of 17 catalog species." The human's expression shifted to genuine concern. "Oh man, seriously? That's terrible. Yeah, You guys definitely want to stay away from this then. He gestured at his food. This is definitely humans-only food. Sorry, I should have realized. Sometimes I forget not everyone can handle spicy food. He was warning them about his lunch, for their safety. While consuming said lunch without apparent discomfort, Vrix attempted a different approach. The red fluid covering your food. Chemical analysis indicates high iron content, consistent with mammalian blood. Explain. The human looked where Vrix was indicating and actually laughed. That's marinara sauce, man. Tomato sauce. It's made from tomatoes. They're fruits. Well, technically berries. Vegetables for cooking purposes. No blood involved at all. Just crushed tomatoes with herbs and stuff. Tomatoes, the translator helpfully provided, were seed-bearing structures produced by plants in the Solanum genus. Humans cultivated them for consumption. The sauce was created by crushing these structures, adding various plant materials called herbs and spices, and heating the mixture. Humans liquefied plant reproductive organs, added more plants, and poured the result over processed animal flesh. For taste, the human, observing their continued confusion, attempted demonstration. He retrieved a clear container from his bag containing wedge-shaped pieces of something pale, yellow and crispy. Here, these are safe, totally safe. Tortilla chips, just corn and salt. No spice at all. Very mild. You guys want to try? He was offering to share his food. This predator species had detected 4 armed apex predators, infiltrating their facility, and was offering to share nutrition. Qhoss, perhaps from professional curiosity, perhaps from sheer bafflement, extended one claw and carefully took a chip. The human smiled, showing teeth, which really should have registered as threat display but somehow did not. Qhoss bit the chip experimentally. Chewed. His thermal signature showed surprise. This is acceptable. Crunchy texture, salt-forward flavor profile. No toxins detected by my system. He took another chip. These are good. The human looked pleased. Right? Can't go wrong with classic tortilla chips. Here, you can try them with salsa too if you want. He pulled out another container filled with chunky red substance. This is also tomato-based, but with peppers, onions, cilantro mixed in. Mild heat level. Should be safe. Probably. Should be safe. Probably. That was apparently how humans described food that would not kill you. Gentara, who had never consumed solid nutrition in front of another species and had no intention of starting, nevertheless found herself asking, "Your people consume these chemical irritants voluntarily. This is accepted cultural practice?" The human nodded enthusiastically. "Oh yeah, absolutely. Hot sauce is huge in human culture. There are entire stores dedicated just to hot sauce. People collect different varieties. There are competitions to see who can eat the hottest peppers. My cousin makes his own ghost pepper blend. Last time I tried it, I thought my face was actually going to melt off. Good times." "Your face was melting?" Vrix asked carefully. No, the human laughed, apparently finding this funny. Figure of speech. It just felt like it was melting. Because of the heat. The capsaicin. It's, kind of hard to explain if you've never experienced it. It hurts, but in a good way. Like exercise, or really loud music at a concert. You know? None of them knew. The human tried again. Okay, so capsaicin. That's the chemical compound that makes peppers spicy. It binds to pain receptors in your mouth and throat. Your nervous system interprets it as heat damage, even though there's no actual tissue damage happening. Creates this really intense sensation. Some people hate it, some people love it. I love it. Endorphin rush. Makes you feel alive. Plus it genuinely does make food taste amazing once you get used to it. You deliberately trigger pain receptors for recreational purposes. Unit 7 stated flatly. The human shrugged. I mean, when you phrase it like that it sounds weird. But yeah, basically. It's kind of a rush. And like I said, it makes food taste better, adds complexity to flavors. It's an experience, you know? Qhoss, who had been steadily consuming chips and salsa during this conversation, tried a piece that apparently had more pepper content than the others. His reaction was immediate and dramatic. His thermal signature spiked by 15 degrees in under 3 seconds. His respiratory system initiated emergency cooling measures. All 6 limbs locked rigid as his nervous system tried to process what was happening. His predatory instincts screamed that he had been poisoned and needed to neutralize the threat immediately. The sound he made was one his species typically reserved for mortal combat. The human's eyes went very wide. Oh no, buddy, I'm so sorry. That must have been a jalapeno piece. Here, drink this. He grabbed his carbonated beverage and thrust it at Qhoss. Milk would be way better, but I don't have any. The carbonation might help cut the heat a little. Qhoss grabbed the container with 2 claws and drank desperately. The cold liquid provided marginal relief. His mouth still felt like he had attempted to ingest a plasma torch. The human looked genuinely distressed. I'm really sorry, man. I should have warned you better about the peppers. Mammalian pain receptors react really strongly to capsaicin. You guys probably have different neurology. That was totally my fault. Do you need medical attention? Should I call someone? He was apologizing for Qhoss's voluntary consumption of human recreational poison, taking full responsibility for the consequences of another species' free choice. This species was completely insane. Vrix attempted to salvage something from this disaster. You claim this substance is recreational, but you are military personnel consuming it regularly. This is not performance enhancement, not combat preparation? The human looked even more confused. What? No, dude. I'm a maintenance tech. I fix stuff when it breaks. The most combat I see is sometimes the coffee machine in the break room fights back when you try to clean it. He gestured at his uniform. See? Maintenance, not military. I'm basically a space janitor who occasionally fixes things more complicated than toilets. Your facility is classified as military training installation in our intelligence files, Gentara pointed out. The human actually laughed. This place, Meridian, we're an engineering training station. We teach people how to maintain life support systems, fix hull breaches, calibrate sensors, repair broken equipment. The only thing we fight here is budget constraints and malfunctioning machinery. Who told you we were military? Intelligence Division, Vrix said before he could stop himself. The human's expression suggested he was fighting very hard not to laugh. Your intelligence division thinks a facility that trains people to fix toilets and recalibrate carbon scrubbers is a military installation. When phrased that way, it did sound somewhat ridiculous, but the evidence, Vrix insisted, though his conviction was weakening. The chemical weapons, the blood consumption, the elevated threat indicators, the security protocols. The human held up his lunch. This is a meatball sub with extra marinara and hot sauce, man. It's food, lunch, a sandwich. It's like saying a ham sandwich is a weapon of war. Is it not? Unit 7 asked with complete sincerity. No, the human said, definitely laughing now. No, sandwiches are not weapons. They're portable meals. Bread, filling, maybe some sauce or vegetables. Easy to eat while you're working. That's literally the entire point of sandwiches. Convenience food. Qhoss, having recovered enough to speak, asked what they were all thinking. But why poison yourself while consuming nutrition? The human smile was fond, almost nostalgic. Because it tastes good, man. Because sometimes you want food that has strong flavors. Because variety makes life interesting. Because humans figured out a really long time ago that if something doesn't immediately kill you, you might as well eat it and see what happens. We're curious like that. Experimental. He took another bite of his lunch, chewed, swallowed, and continued. Look, I get it. You guys come from species where food is probably just fuel, right? Efficient, practical, optimized for nutrition. But humans, we've always been kind of weird about food. We don't just eat to survive. We eat for pleasure, for culture, for tradition, for art even. We take ingredients from all over and combine them in ways that shouldn't work but somehow do. And yeah, sometimes we eat things that are a little painful, because the pain is part of what makes it interesting. He gestured with his sandwich. This right here? This is cheap cafeteria meatballs, mass-produced marinara from a jar, bread that's probably 3 days old, and hot sauce I brought from home because the station commissary stuff is way too mild. It's not fancy. It's not expensive. But it's mine. It's familiar. It tastes like home even though I'm thousands of light years away from Earth. It's comfort food that actually comforts, you know? There was something in his voice, in his expression, that Vrix recognized. It was the sound of someone far from their homeworld, making do with limited resources, finding joy in small things. It was the sound of someone who had learned to survive by appreciating what they had rather than mourning what they lacked. It was the sound of a survivor, and suddenly Vrix understood. Humans were not apex predators. They lacked the natural weapons, the armored hides, the evolved advantages. They were not prey species either, lacking the herd instincts, the defensive adaptations, the submission behaviors. They were survivors. They had survived their death world not through superior armament or perfect camouflage, but through adaptability. Through taking whatever their environment provided and making it work. Through finding pleasure in the midst of hardship. Through looking at poisonous plants and saying, what if we ate these anyway, and just develop tolerance? Through putting hot sauce on cheap meatballs and calling it a taste of home. Your people, Vrix said slowly, consume recreational poison, befriend species that could consume you, maintain military-grade security with bent wire, come from a death world but behave like playground attendants, have no natural weapons but conquered your planet anyway. You make no sense by any standard threat assessment model. The human's grin was bright and genuine. Yeah, we get that a lot. It's kind of our thing. Makes life interesting though. Right? He offered the container of chips again. You guys want to stay for lunch? I've got plenty of food. And I promise, no more surprises. I'll label everything by heat level. We can do a whole cultural exchange thing. I'll teach you about human food culture. You can tell me why Elite Strike Team was spying on a maintenance tech eating a sandwich. It was phrased as a joke, but there was genuine friendliness underneath. Genuine invitation. This human had discovered armed infiltrators in his facility and was offering to share lunch and conversation. Unit 7 ran probability calculations, assessed threat levels, and concluded, this human is either the most dangerous operative in the galaxy or completely harmless. I cannot determine which with available data. Why not both? The human suggested cheerfully. Vrix made a decision. He would file his report. Honestly. He would explain that humans consumed chemical irritants for pleasure, that they deliberately contaminated their food with substances classified as weapons by multiple species, that they considered this normal behavior. He would note that human security was genuinely inadequate, not cleverly disguised. He would admit that Intelligence Division had dispatched an Apex Predator Strike team to observe a junior maintenance technician consuming lunch. He would recommend that humans be reclassified, not as predators, not as prey, as unpredictable, as volatile, as fundamentally impossible to categorize using standard assessment models. The human was pulling out more containers now, explaining each item with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved sharing food and culture. Qhoss was trying chips with increasing confidence, carefully avoiding pepper pieces. Gentara had lowered her guard enough to examine the marinara sauce, with something approaching scientific curiosity. Unit 7 was scanning everything, and filing reports that would probably be ignored by analysts who would assume equipment malfunction. And, somewhere, in an office on Station Kepler 9, a bureaucrat would receive Vrix's report and create a new category in the threat assessment database. Species, human. Classification, volatile, unpredictable. Threat level, undefined. Reasoning, any species that deliberately consumes neurotoxins for recreational purposes, befriends potential predators as companions, maintains critical infrastructure security with improvised tools, and considers chemical weapons to be condiments cannot be adequately assessed using standard threat evaluation protocols. Recommend extreme caution and mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all personnel assigned to human interaction. Additional recommendation. Update cafeteria guidelines to include warnings about human food sharing practices. Supplementary notes. Do not accept food from humans without clear labeling and species compatibility verification. Do not assume human dietary choices are safe for other species. Do not attempt to match human spice tolerance. They will win, and you will require medical attention. The human, whose name was Marcus Webb and whose job was fixing broken equipment, would return to his quarters that evening completely unaware that he had caused a minor diplomatic incident, triggered a comprehensive security review, and fundamentally altered how the galaxy viewed his entire species. He would eat dinner, probably something with even more hot sauce, and send a message to his family about the weird day he had where some aliens thought his lunch was a biological weapon. His family would find this hilarious. And somewhere in the depths of space, the galaxy would continue its rotation, slightly more confused than before, which was exactly how humans seemed to prefer their relationships with other species. After all, any species that survived by being fundamentally incomprehensible was probably too dangerous to fight and too friendly to hate. Better to just accept them, exchange recipes, and hope they did not decide to share their coffee next. That, Intelligence Division would note 6 months later, after another incident, was a whole different category of problem. But that was a concern for future analysts. For now, there was lunch to share, cultural barriers to navigate, and the universal truth that no matter where you evolved or what evolutionary pressures shaped you, everyone could appreciate a good chip, even if some of those chips came with mandatory heat warnings, liability waivers, and medical disclaimers. The galaxy was vast and ancient and full of dangers, both known and unknown, but it had never encountered anything quite like a human with a meatball sub, a bottle of hot,